For our first segment today, we will be having a discussion to bring some pointers to those that contend with difficulties processing their claims for VA benefits, and this is something that affects all generations of veterans. Rick Rogers is host of Front and Center. Front and Center is a veteran radio program that airs on a sister station to 1380 KTKZ. Front and Center airs on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. on 1170 KCBQ in San Diego. He has a well-developed blog and news feed on his website, which serves the show and his reporting at defensetracker.com. And the ideal setup is what you do is on Sunday mornings you tune in to Veteran Radio or stream it off of ktkz.com or tune in at 1380 a.m. Then go to breakfast or go to church. And then when you're done, tune in or stream Front and Center on 1170 KCBQ in San Diego. And I think that's a healthy way to plug things. Good morning to you, Rick. How are you?
Max Ramsey, thank you so much for having me on Veteran Radio.
I appreciate it. So you and I, we've talked a little bit in the past. Let's introduce you a bit to who Rick Rogers is to the Sacramento audience here. You were a military reporter in the Marine Corps, correct?
Well, I was a military reporter. I was in the Army. I was a sergeant and then a staff sergeant when I was reporting at Stars and Stripes in Tokyo. From there, I traveled all over the Far East. And had a great time just covering the military, covering all the services for about 4.5 years.
Excellent. And so your background in journalism obviously lended itself to the development of your program, Front and Center. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because that program is quite a bit more mature than Veteran Radio up here in Sacramento.
Well, I was a reporter. I was a senior military reporter for the San Diego Union Tribune for 4 years. Altogether, I have 27 years of covering the military. In fact, my entire adult life. So I was reporting for the Union Tribune, and as often happens to reporters, I was let go back in 2009. And then I thought, well, what can I do? What have I always wanted to do? And what I always wanted to do was be able to give veterans and military members and dependents the best news and information I knew that was out there. Unfortunately, with the shrinking news hole of newspapers, that's not really happening. So I started a year ago in March 2009 with Front and Center Military Talk Radio, and I've been running a show ever since. And most of the time I've also been a columnist, a military columnist.
Okay, so Front and Center actually goes all the way back to March of 2009 then.
No,
Oh, okay.
That's when I left the newspaper, and that's when
okay.
I started writing columns. The show itself started March 4th, 2011, down here in San Diego County.
Excellent. So we'll touch more on that program as well as we meander through here. One of the things that when I learned about your program, I obviously had to check you out and see what was going on so I could, what's the polite word, copy you. And
it's a sincerest form of flattery, I've
Of
heard.
course, and I wanted to touch on so much flattery with you, but one blog post that you had on your site that caught my eye, and it's fairly basic in nature, but I think it's great coaching material for all generation of vets, was a blog post that you had titled "An Unconventional Way to Get Your VA Benefits." Do you remember when you wrote this?
Yeah, I wrote that about a year ago, although I reposted it on just this past February 2012. But I probably wrote it 6 or 8 months before this. I also like that post just because I received so many calls from veterans that were just kind of at the end of their rope, having such a difficult time going through normal channels to get their VA benefits. I thought about it, and I said, well, maybe there's another way to do it.
Absolutely, and you have primarily throughout this blog post 4 primary points, and the first one you mention as cast a wide net, which I love, and this should be it's apropos that it's the first point. Tell everybody what you mean by casting a wide net when it comes to dealing with the Veterans Affairs, whether it's state, federal, or some other organization.
Well, you know what I did? It's very simple. What I did was just take what my approach is as a reporter. This is exactly my approach as a reporter, and then I thought, well, how is that applicable to someone, a veteran trying to get his or her deserved benefits? And when I would need one piece of information for a story, I'd call 5 people because I'd figure that not everyone would get back to me, and if 2 people did, well, that's twice as good. So my first recommendation is cast a wide net. The more people you have pulling on the informational oars for you, the more likely you're going to get someplace. So that was where I started. Call a lot of people.
Absolutely, and this comes in, I think, very good timing for the current generation of vets, especially because I'm a recent veteran of the recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I never went to Afghanistan, but I'm part of the same generation, and a lot of the guys in my unit express the frustrations that they have in trying to work through the system correctly. And it seems to me, and I can't speak for them, but in a lot of ways I can't help but wonder if what they're doing is they're calling one guy and just accepting the answer and just sitting there waiting for something to happen, whereas it helps to get a little curious and ask more detailed questions and find out, well, who else works on that. And I had a similar issue just this past week myself with the VA. It wasn't life-threatening or anything grinding, but in the end, it did take me to call literally about 3 or 4 different people to get the right information to the right person in the first place, and the situation did remedy itself. The next item that you had in your article, you talk about, you titled it "Be Understandingly at First." I'm assuming you mean like be understanding at first, or what is the understandingly? What's the context there?
Yeah, Max, everyone needs an editor, including reporters. It should be understanding ... at first, meaning that I think most people are trying to help you out. I don't think that there's any kind of conspiracy at the VA, people trying to keep you from getting your benefits. The problem that they have is the problem that we all have. We have infinite amount of work and finite time to do it. So I think that if you approach somebody and take it on good faith, if they're trying to help you, I think that that's a good way to go. Don't be mean and sarcastic right off the bat. It's the old theory that you get farther with honey than you do salt.
Correct. Right. However, you do add the caveat in there that, and I'll quote you, profusely thank each contact along the way and document everything like a Philadelphia lawyer.
Absolutely. I think it's important. You have to do your due diligence. You have to stick up for yourself. People may be willing to help you, but again, they may just be so overwhelmed with people, with other cases, that you may kind of get lost in the shuffle. If you document everything, then at some point you can call and you can say, I called 6 times. On February 12th, I called Jim Smith, and I talked to him for 5 minutes. Then I called Jane Betty, and I talked to her from 11:30 to 11:38, and then I called so-and-so. I mean, that gives you incredible credibility, I believe, that when you can document things to such a precise level. Plus, the person you're talking to, I think that they sit up in their chair and they go, man, this person isn't messing around. He's serious. He's got his facts straight. He knows who he talked to. He knows the time. He knows the subject matter. So it's a lot harder to gaff off somebody like that.
Exactly, and it really plays into things that we learned when we were in the military, the eternal cover your backside to a certain degree, always make copies of everything. Whenever you're given orders or papers or something to carry out, always make a copy, have a backup, do whatever. When it comes to documenting everything, even when it comes to logging phone calls, the best way I've always done is if I have a manila folder, I'll just log it literally on the manila folder itself, right there on the outside or on the inside cover of it, to get things memorialized when dealing with an issue. And then you get right into it. If that doesn't start to work, you have 2 parts to the idea of getting tough. Kind of give us an idea of why or how you thought of part 1, or how did you come up with 2 parts, I guess you could say, and share the story about this Korean War vet whose story you cite in this article here.
Well, as I say in the column, government staffing issues should not be your problem, right? You should give them 90 days. Try to go through the official gauntlet for 90 days, and if that doesn't work, I think it's time to change tactics. Now, the example that I used, there's this guy that gave me a call, and he was a Korean War veteran who had lost his leg in the service, and he had tried to go through the regular channels to get his benefits, and it just wasn't working whatsoever. So what I did, I asked him where he lived. He told me where he lived, and I typed in his information, and I figured out that his congressman was Darrell Issa from Vista. So I called Issa's office, and I called his vet back, and I got them both together. And I told the vet, I said, when you call the congressman's office, make sure that you lay out your story in a concise manner. Make sure that you send the information to at least 3 people in Issa's office. And the importance of that is not only did you write the information down in a concise manner and send it to them, but they know that they have it. And you want to send it to them either email or even potentially certified mail. Is it going to cost you a couple bucks? Yes, it's going to cost you a couple bucks, but it could very, very possibly help you very much in the long run.
Absolutely, and just like Southern California, you have Congressman Issa. I know Congressman Filner is very sensitive to veteran issues there. He's down in San Diego, and Sacramento is not short on congressmen that have a ready ear waiting to lend a help to veterans that need assistance with issues going forward. Now, when things don't get there using the official political channels, you have part 2 of getting tough. And what the way I read it, I would almost look at this as like the last resort. But you give me the context from which you were writing it when you were talking about that.
Well, I think it is the last resort. Now, and part 2 of getting tough, essentially I say, go to the media. This was easier to do a couple years ago, or maybe a decade ago, even when there was more media to go to. It's a little bit more difficult now, but if you have expended every other option, then you might as well go to the media. Now, the reason I say this is that I know I've had some vets come to me who have been working diligently through correct channels, official channels, for years. They come to me and they lay out their issue, and I ask them some questions, and I decide whether it's a legit case or not, and then I call the VA myself, and they know who I am around here, and I just ask them some questions, and you'd be amazed how one call from a reporter can get things done. Now, oftentimes I don't write stories because if I call and things get fixed, that's what I wanted. So I'm not going to call the VA and then they're going to fix things and then I'm going to burn them by writing a story about how things didn't get fixed until I called, because you have to think, what's the end result that you want? Well,
right.
The end result that I want is to help the veteran. And if the VA knows that if I make a telephone call and they fix it and I'm not going to burn them, well, that probably means I'm going to be able to help a veteran in the future.
Exactly. We're on the air this morning with Rick Rogers. Rick Rogers is the host of Front and Center, which is a veteran radio program that airs at 11 a.m. on Sundays at our sister station, 1170 KCBQ in San Diego. You're on the air now with Veteran Radio. So as we were talking about this, and like I had mentioned earlier in the program, I had come across Rick's program while doing research about my program and saw how well laid out his program was, especially his website, defensetracker.com. Do you got a handle about what you got coming on the air later this morning?
Yes, I do. I am going to have Tom Philpott, who is a military columnist back in D.C. He writes the column Military Update. I'm going to talk to him about a recent survey that came out that's actually good news. I like to report good news at every turn, at every chance I get. And there's a study that came out that talked about the resiliency of military marriages. Now, apparently, marriage is tough for everybody, and as you can imagine, marriage would be especially tough if you're in the military. But military marriages are apparently hanging in there a lot better than what people have thought. So I'm going to talk to Tom Philpott about marriage in the military. My other guest is going to be Mike Dakduk, who's Executive Director of Student Veterans of America. Now, recently, Student Veterans of America, they suspended chapters at 40 for-profit colleges and universities across the country because they believe that the chapters there were essentially scams, that the for-profits were setting up these alleged Student Veterans of America chapters that weren't run by student veterans at all, but by school officials. So I'm going to talk to him about...
Oh, man, I'm going to listen in on that for sure.
I'm going to talk to him about for-profits. For-profits are under a lot of scrutiny lately. A lot of people aren't too happy with the educational offerings that they're putting out there. They don't like their high default rates. They don't like their high tuition rate for credit hour amounts, and they don't like that, in many eyes, these degrees just aren't worth the paper that they're printed on.
Very interesting. So that's coming up at 11 a.m. on the sister station to 1380 KTKZ here in Sacramento. That's front and center at 11 a.m. on 1170 KCBQ in San Diego. Rick Rogers is the host, and he's my guest here this morning. And that's a very interesting story because I had read up about the Student Veterans of America and the various chapters that they had set up, and I hadn't gone to any length about having them on the air, I had thought, but it's interesting that we've seen a wrinkle on that, and that's been a concern of mine as well about the what I call predatory for-profit institutions that try to rope you in without revealing all the realities.
What I say to them about them is that what they're out to do, the great majority of them are out there to mine GI gold. You know, there's gold in them thar pockets.
That's right.
And that's what they want to do. And it's interesting. Senator Patty Murray, the senator from Washington, who was on my show last week. She is chair of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. She has a new bill out that's going to really hold these for-profits to the fire, and they're going to make them reveal just what their default rates are, just what their pricing is, and just how many people with their degrees are actually getting jobs. So not only that, but there are other organizations like the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the IAVA, and they're also one of their focuses for this year is to make sure that the for-profits do the right thing for our veterans. So there's increasing pressure on the for-profits from many different fronts, and hopefully it cleans up the system.
Certainly, and sometimes all it takes is a little sunlight, and sometimes things kind of take care of themselves.
Sunlight is a huge disinfectant.
Yes, it is. Rick Rogers, host of Front and Center, which airs on a sister station to 1380 KTKZ, airs at 11 a.m. on Sunday, at 1170 KCBQ in San Diego. So go ahead and stream them in off the internet after you've come back from breakfast or church after listening to Veteran Radio. The website for his show and blog is defensetracker.com. It's very comprehensive, has a lot of content on it. Quite the impressive and mature site for that kind of veteran information. Rick, thanks so much for joining us up here in Sacramento this morning.
Max, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed myself on Veteran Radio. I hope to have you on my show sometime soon.
Outstanding. Well, I appreciate it, Rick. Thanks very much. And coming up, we'll have some highlights into the second half of the hour of Veteran Radio. My name is Max Ramsey. This is 1380 KTKZ, and you are listening to Veteran Radio.